In Greek society and culture, no profession was more respected than that of a teacher. One who had information that they were able to impart to another was on the highest rung of the social ladder. But to speak of one as a master teacher was to describe a person who had the capability of skillfully and interestingly imparting knowledge to others. While it may not always have been so, the term implied that this master teacher was very careful in their way of life, so as not to tarnish the strength and application of those truths that had been entrusted to them as a teacher. The term master teacher has been correctly applied to Jesus, who was and is truly the master teacher in every area of life. By what reasoning, though, do we describe him in this way? Well, first we see that he truly was a great teacher. He was the master of all master teachers. The Greek text calls Jesus teacher 45 times in the gospel accounts. Also, that which Jesus did is called teaching an additional 45 times, and those who followed him were called disciples or learners 215 times. It's interesting to note that Jesus' beloved Sermon on the Mount, which is found in Matthew 5 and 5, 6, and 7, is described as a time when Jesus opened his mouth and taught them, Matthew 5 and verse 2. And there's an element of teaching in any effective sermon that's presented, but an absence thereof diminishes its effectiveness and may indicate an improper motive. So we see that Jesus truly was the master teacher. He knew the value of teaching. Now, like it or not, Christianity is a taught religion. It does not come upon us without instruction in the Word of God, but it depends upon the energy, commitment, and preparation of a teacher. And Jesus had all of these qualifications. He taught under a tree, on a mountain, by a river, from a boat out on a lake, in the synagogue, in the streets, in their houses. He did what Ezra and the priests had done 500 years earlier, as recorded in Nehemiah 8 and verse 8. Jesus read in the book of the law of God distinctly, and gave the sense and caused them to understand the reading. So truly, he was and is a master teacher. Also, we see that Jesus spoke plainly. We have to remember that teaching does not take place until learning takes place. And Jesus spoke in such simple, plain terms that no one whose heart was honest could truly understand what he said. In John 10 and verse 24, we read that those who saw and heard Jesus wanted to hear plain language. Well, people today still want to hear plain words. That which is obscure, ambiguous, convoluted, cryptic, and complicated, while it may sound good in the college classroom and it may look good in academic journals, people need to hear the truth. They need to hear all the truth, nothing but the truth, and they need to hear it in a way that they can understand it. Jesus spoke plainly to Nicodemus concerning his need to be born again in John 3, verses 3 through 7. He spoke plainly to the woman of Samaria about the practical truths that she needed to hear. He taught her that God is a spirit. They who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth, John 4 and verse 24. The scribes and the Pharisees needed words that were clear and to the point, and Matthew 23:23 records him as saying, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites!" Now, if you want to be an effective teacher, you need to start right now learning how to speak plainly and clearly, because teaching does not begin until learning begins. Also, we see that Jesus' material was that which was practical. Jesus did not speak that which was merely philosophical, that which was devoid of any practical use. Jesus' parables were not used to show his storytelling abilities. His debates were not merely to provide a means of boasting for Jesus, but it was there to oppose error. His miracles were not merely an exhibition of magical powers, but proved the validity of his words. His logic was utilized because God's truth is rational and reasonable, and the Bible itself is the most practical book that has ever been written. And Jesus demanded something of his hearers in Matthew 7 and verse 21. To be Jesus' disciple demanded total commitment to Him, and it still does even 2,000 years later. He is still teaching us, and He is still the Master Teacher. Friends, we thank you for joining us for our program today, and have a blessed day.